Okay, good morning. It is 11 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Shannon Quigley from Fort Wayne Community Schools, and I'm excited to be hosting today, What Do We Do If They Don't Get It with Carrie Rosebrock. So we're in for a great session today. Carrie is an author and district PLC coach in Indianapolis, Indiana, and as a consultant, she works with schools to improve and develop their PLC processes, instructional leadership, curriculum and assessments, literacy practices, and teacher leadership. She's also the co-author of the educational leadership book, Arrows, a system-based approach to school leadership. And she is the co-chair for the curriculum and assessment tactic team for Keep Indiana Learning. Most recently, she was a specialist for CIESC, and prior to that, she served as the secondary English administrator for Brownsburg Community School Corporation. So we're very happy to have her leading this session today and can't wait to learn with her today. So thank you, Carrie. We'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Okay, so full disclosure, also co-coordinating this conference. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take my phone and I'm not gonna see what's happening because I know my awesome team is behind the scenes troubleshooting any other sessions right now. I have to ask just to make sure I do not forget, nope, go backwards. I wanna remind you that live transcripts are available in this session. So you can enable that on your own via Zoom. If that is something that you would like or you would need, you can go ahead and enable that. I also want to make sure, Shannon, we're recording, right? I see a little flashing red. So to me, I think that means we're recording. Okay, awesome. Welcome. As you come in, we are going to record today's session. So if you're watching this live and participating right now on June 29th, fantastic. If you are watching this and it's September or December or April or next June 29th, because our sessions will last for 1 year, welcome. I hope this is going to be an engaging, thought-provoking little session for you. I've already seen a couple of Q&A in the Whova platform. So a little behind the scenes for Carrie. I have screen sharing Zoom going on here. I have on my laptop the Whova platform open. That's where we want to chat today in our session. Whatever you put in the chat through Whova, not Zoom, but Whova is going to get us it's going to capture, that's what I'm trying to say. It's going to capture what we talk about. I will utilize breakouts at one point in this session. So be prepared. Shannon's going to help us with that because she is our host. And then what you discuss in the breakout will not be recorded. So just a few housekeeping items there. But I will probably drop some links in the chat too. In the session description in Whova, question? Okay. Oh, why am I echoing? Shannon, can you help me? We're going to mute everyone. Thanks. All right. In Whova, there is a PDF of the presentation. That's the first link. So if you want a PDF of the slides, you can have that there. And then I've also linked below in Whova the Google Doc of this presentation. So you can access it there. And then in the Whova platform too, at the end of this session, and I'll remind you at the end, it's a session feedback and there is a survey link and you can click on that, fill out the session feedback form, and that will automatically send you PGPs. So again, if you're watching this in September, October, next April, next June, when you get it done, you can fill out that survey and it will auto send you PGPs. So hi, Lisa, thank you. I'm going to tell you all a little bit about myself. And while I'm doing that, if you can drop in the chat in Whova your name and where you're coming from, that would be fantastic. This is a really great opportunity. Again, if you're watching this at a later time, still join in the chat because this is a great way for you to find connections to other people around the state who might be able to support you in your research-based approaches and responding to PLCs. All right, so I'm Carrie, and I am the author of Arrows, as Shannon mentioned. Arrows is a system-based approach to school leadership. I'm the former secondary administrator in Brownsburg. I have a heart for coaching districts around PLC processes because I care about people, and I really believe that we as people are the solution, and that it is our ability to work together to figure out what works and what doesn't that's going to transform education. I'm all about people, not programs. I'm all about aligning our arrows so that we have common system-based approaches. And that's really who I am. And that's a picture of me and my husband. You can follow me on social media at Carrie Rosebrock. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram, or find me on Facebook if you want. I'm not actually, Shannon, don't get mad, I'm not on TikTok yet. Shannon's one of our digital learning coaches with Keep Indiana Learning, and she runs an amazing TikTok channel there. So you should definitely check it out if you are not already following our Keep Indiana Learning TikTok. So it's a little bit about me. So thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Dawn. Hi, Dawn. There is a question about, will what we covered today apply to high school? Absolutely. So when I was in Brownsburg, I was a 6 through 12 administrator over ELA. And so a lot of what I will share in any presentations that I do does come with my experience as more of a secondary lens. However, in my role at CIESC and in coaching districts now, I've also built up the portfolio of what works for elementary. Sometimes it's the same strategy, sometimes it's different, but I totally understand that different level of student and teacher, depending on the level, can make a huge difference. So definitely drop into the Whova chat where you are from. Here are some of our session objectives for today. We're going to revisit and establish the why behind PLCs, like why now more than ever. And that's crucial because if you looked at the title of my session, what do we do if they don't get it? That is really a reference back to DuFour's third question in the PLC process. And I'll go over that with us again today, but really as we come into this pandemic and we try to figure out how do we best support kids, again, it's people, not programs. It's this PLC approach. It's empowering our teachers to work together in collaboration. And sometimes the missing piece is, what is that best research to use? How I have the data now, what do I do with it? Even as a district coach, when I think back on the teachers I supported, I'm like, that was always the question I've never felt competent to answer. And so over these past 2 years, I feel like I've been fortunate to really dive into John Hattie's research, which is what we're going to explore. And specifically today, I'm going to do an activity with you that has us dive into some literacy practices with Hattie. But that's really what we want to do. We've got to be able to say, how do we work together? And then what research do we look at to figure out what it is that we need to do? You can put me in a PLC, but if there's no conversation around the actual strategies that no pun intended, move the arrow, then I'm just a frustrated teacher. Okay. So as Shannon had mentioned, and I mentioned, I'm the co-author for the book Arrows. Now, Sarah Henry is my other author, and she's actually going to have a spotlight session later tomorrow afternoon, that would allow you to jump in and visit and ask her any further questions about Arrows, this book that we wrote. And the whole point of writing Arrows was really to try to take all these components that we hear get talked about at conferences and that we read about in books and the research and the theory, and to say, well, what happens when you actually put it into practice? And so Arrows is the story of the Brownsburg Community School Corporation over the past 10 years. And really what happened when we focused on PLCs, when we got better at going through the 4 questions, when we figured out how to work together, when we figured out how to be comfortable with not being comfortable together. And it really tells the story from the leadership perspective about how empowering teachers empowered students. So I include this quote for us today, and it is, the best teachers, the ones who light the fires and fan the flames, understand that it's not about what they taught. It's about what their students learned. That's the crux of everything around education. What are our students learning from us? I'm thinking about what Trevor shared in his keynote. And if you're watching this later and you haven't watched Trevor Muir's keynote, go back and watch that at another time. Trevor was talking all about the power of stories to influence and connect with kids, how relevance has to be present for our students to learn. And oftentimes when we are trying to figure out how to best reach our students, those are pieces, that relevancy, that project-based learning, that can get left off the table. And sometimes in this PLC process, when we're talking about data and we're talking about, how do we respond to it, we can get, I would say, almost kind of tunnel vision in thinking of data as quiz scores, or thinking of data as, just numbers, and we forget about qualitative data, or we don't spend enough time talking about, now what do I do with this? So I have some struggling readers. What do I do with that information? What other strategies work? And that's kind of what we're going to dive into today. Yay. Hi, Kristen. Hi, Irene. I'm checking the chat. Hi, Brittany. I love it. Hey, North Montgomery Middle School. I do work with you guys. You guys are kicking off PLCs this year. I'm so excited for you. Hi, Shannon at Sugar Creek. I think, is this Sugar Creek in New Pal? If so, I've probably seen Shannon before too. Welcome, welcome. Okay. So oftentimes when I talk about PLCs, I like to include this quote because working with people isn't easy. And when you're asking me as a teacher to get into a small group and a PLC and to look at data and to figure out what do we do with it, I'm uncomfortable, okay? I don't want to talk to you about any data. I don't like talking to people about my finances. I don't want to talk to you about my weight. I don't want to talk to you about how old I am. I don't want to talk to you about my 7th graders' constructed response scores. Data can feel permanent and it can feel kind of uncomfortable. And so I believe it's very much our job as leaders, whether I'm a PLC leader, the building leader, the corporation leader, it is our job to normalize the fact that working together in a PLC to answer, what do I do with this data? How do I actually respond to the learning? That is uncomfortable. It's not easy and it's not supposed to be. But it is important. So I always start with it. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. It's the hard that makes it great. And I quote that from A League of Their Own. I'm curious if you are joining today and you are a part of a PLC, if you want to drop into the Whova chat and the platform, like you can even just say like PLC, I'm a member, go ahead and respond over there and let us know if you're a member of a PLC. But it's hard. It's hard being a part of a PLC and talking about data. One of the hard parts about talking about data is that I think for too long, we have left the equity part out of the equation. We have left out the dignity and humanity part of the equation. Now, as we're coming back after the pandemic, we're all trying to ask ourselves, like, what do we do? And it's a two-pronged approach. Now, one of the best resources that I read over this past year is called Belonging Through a Culture of Dignity. And it's by Floyd Cobb and John Cronapple. And they are phenomenal authors who really take this question of how do we create equitable learning for all? And they unpack it into this very simple two-pronged approach here. And what they claim is that equity is all about having access to dignity and content. So as a student, I need to know that I belong and I need to have access to high quality, rigorous content curriculum assessments. When I think back on my own journey, Trevor was talking about the power of stories. When I think about my own journey as a school administrator in a district, we were really good at talking about the content part. I'm going to show you an image in a little bit of 4 bases, and my co-author Sarah and I, we use this analogy to talk about PLCs, and we talk about how first you need to have common curriculum, then second base is common assessments, third base is responding to data, which is what we're going to dive into today. But we're really good when we talk about PLCs about that content part, though I'd argue like we still don't feel great about the responding to data and the research. We don't always give ourselves permission to keep the access to dignity involved. And when you're talking about making sure all students can learn, that means all students have value. All students deserve the opportunity to try again, to have more time, to get a reteach. It isn't just, I taught it, you should have learned it. It's, I taught it, did you learn it? How can I know? How can you tell me? What can I do differently as the teacher? PLCs are all about working together in a team, and that's messy and muddy and difficult to figure out, are we always doing what's best for students? Are we always responding? I love this equation from John and Floyd, and this is an image that they also include in their text. And so I use this with permission from the 2 authors. This is an image, a graphic of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Maslow talks about how before we can have achievement, before we can get to self-actualization, we have to feel psychologically secure. We have to have safety. And there's a missing piece there. That little figure is jumping over a missing step, and it's a sense of belonging. And to feel like you belong means that you matter. And I know we've all experienced as students ourselves times where we felt like we just didn't fit. We just didn't matter. We didn't belong. We didn't belong with either the the team we were a part of. We didn't belong in the classroom we were in. We didn't belong sometimes in our families, which is difficult. So when we think about what do I do, what strategies do I use to respond to the data, we can't forget about the fact that students have to feel a sense of belonging and value before I can do that, before you can talk to me about retaking a quiz or working on my math skills. But we as teachers have to feel that incredibly deep sense of belonging as well. And that's really what the two authors talk about in Unpack. And so as a teacher, if you want me to sit in a group in a PLC or to reflect even on my own about what do I do with this PLC data, I have to feel like my administration values me and I have a sense of belonging and that I am safe to be able to share about the outcome on an assessment, to share with colleagues, to share the numbers. When I feel safe and that I belong and I'm not going to be an outsider just based on the data, when I feel that safety, then I'll open up, then I'll be vulnerable, then I'll be real, then we can make changes, then I can take steps, then I can grow. So this vulnerability piece and this belonging piece is so essential. And I really believe it goes all around the 4 essential questions. So I mentioned earlier, I'm talking a lot about PLCs, and I mentioned earlier the Richard DuFour and these basic 4 questions that many of us use in PLC models, and here they are. The main 4 questions are, what do we want students to know? That's first base. That's your common curriculum. How will we know they've learned it? That's second base. That is your common assessments. What will we do for students who struggle? This is the part we unpack today. And what will we do to enrich learning for others? We're also going to unpack that today. Now, I know I'm going to offer some strategies that you might say, well, I already use this and I don't know if it's effective, or I can't possibly use all of these. Know that when we get to this point, the goal isn't becoming a master at every single one of the strategies. The goal is knowing what research do I turn to. So I was just illustrating, I've said a little bit, this is that baseball analogy. The beginning of all of this, though, is the why, the pitching mound. Like, why do we go through this process of working together and collaborating and having these difficult conversations and responding to data? Why do we do this? Because at the heart of everything is, are the kids learning? Do I value all my students enough to figure out what I can change and do differently as a teacher to make sure they are learning the ways they need to? Do I value myself enough as an educator to push myself, to grow, to be open, to be vulnerable, so that I am growing with my colleagues? All of this starts with the why. And the why behind it all is, are we growing? Are we learning? Okay, so that's great. As a team, we figured out, we like this 4 baseball analogy. We talk about this in our book. We talk about equity. Here was the missing piece. This is where I was weak. This is where I'm like, man, I want to go back to Cody, my 7th grade English teacher, who's actually one of my good friends, and say, Cody, this is what we didn't do. This is what we didn't look at through all of those times. This is what we didn't think about. And here's how we answer questions 3 and 4. Okay. So the research I'm going to reference that really a lot of educators reference all around the world is the research of John Hattie. And John Hattie is in this picture here on the left. And he is the director of research for an education center in Melbourne, Australia. So he's Australian. If you've ever gotten to hear John Hattie speak, he's an amazing speaker. He's wonderful. He's fantastic. I highly encourage that if you're ever in a conference and you can hear John Hattie speak, you definitely want to listen and attend a session with him. But Hattie leads this team. And what they do is every 2 years, they look at the research about what works in education. And it's a meta-analysis, right? It isn't just one study. His team is like that. They study all the studies. So his research has become this definitive body of research that many of us turn to. And as an educator, until like a year and a half ago, I didn't even know who he was. I knew that we were about PLCs. I knew that there was power in people working together. I knew it was a messy process. I knew the 4 bases, but I didn't know about Hattie's research. So what his research basically does is their research says that students are going to learn a typical amount each year. And you can see that the yellow on the screen, there's an image on the screen, and it's kind of like a half moon pie chart. And from 0 to 20 is developmental effects. And that's typical growth of students just developmentally as they grow year to year. And then from point 2 to point 4, it's a green slice of the pie, and it's his typical teacher effects. So he and his team is able to look at all these studies and say, okay, what teaching strategies create typical teacher effects? And then there's this magic number, and it's 0.4. And 0.4 on this scale equals 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. I wish it was 1. I wish 1 equaled 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, but it's 0.4. Okay, so thinking about that logically, 0.8 equals 2 years growth in 1 year's time, and 1.2 equals 3 years growth in 1 year's time, right? So the studies show what kind of an effect a certain strategy has on learning. And if I want to sit with my team and I want to say, here's the data on an assessment I gave, and I've got kids who still didn't learn it, and I need to figure out what research is going to accelerate these kiddos the fastest, I don't have to guess. I don't have to do a Google search. I don't have to go to Pinterest. I don't have to scour the textbook. I have to remember there is research out there, and John Hattie and his team conduct it. It's called Visible Learning, and it tells us what has the biggest effect on student learning. Now, the plot out in secret, the highest effect on student learning, the very, very highest effect on student learning, collective teacher efficacy. Let me pop that into the chat. So you're gonna watch me kind of like turning my head for a minute. Collective teacher efficacy, highest effect. Highest effect, it's like a 2.67. It's super high. The PLC process. It's the #1 thing we can do to impact student learning. Okay, but here's where the plot thickens. So there are like all of these different influences on learning that you can find from Hattie's research and his team. You can find all these different resources, and some help accelerate math, and some help accelerate science, and some are just general acceleration, and then some help accelerate literacy. And so I'm going to demonstrate an activity with you all today that really has you think about what moves student learning, and it's going to be from the lens of literacy. So if you are a math teacher, don't panic. You're still going to see strategies that actually accelerate math as well. But this research comes from Fisher, Frey, and Hattie's Visible Learning for Literacy. So that book takes all of these influences on learning and pares it down to the top 18 strategies that impact literacy and reading. And there's more. Some of the strategies create surface learning for students, comprehension. Some create deep literacy practices for them that which help them to analyze, make decisions. Think of it as DOK3. And some of the literacy strategies help them to transfer what they've read. So imagine now I'm sitting in a PLC and I'm sitting here looking at data, and we've got a list of kids who didn't get it, and some kids who were on par, and some kids who got it at the very beginning. And I need to know how to differentiate. If I can know what strategies create surface literacy and build comprehension, I can know that my struggling readers need more of that. Or in small group or reteach, that's what I'm going to utilize. If I keep giving assessments and my kiddos can't analyze, and they can't go deeper, and they can't make the deeper, you know what I mean, they can't analyze the text, then I need to do more deep literacy strategies to have them think about reading more critically. And if I know as the teacher which ones do what, then I can plan that way accordingly. Either at the beginning of my unit, we're doing more surface reading strategies, or the first time we read a passage, we're doing more surface reading strategies, and the second time it's deep with a deeper activity, and then eventually transfer. But I have to know what the strategies are. So here's soon where I'm going to put you into a breakout. So I've got to drop this in. I'm going to put this in the Whova chat. So I'm going to call this surface deep transfer activity, and I am linking it in the Whova chat. If you were already, it's open to share. If you were already in the presentation, because the presentation itself is linked in the Whova discussion. You can find this at any time. It's below the description. You can go to slide 13, click on Surface Deep and Transfer Deck, and you are going to get access in. I should see your little, yeah, I see some little animals in there. So at this point, here's what needs to happen, because we're going to put you in a breakout soon. And this is where I need you to engage, and you're going to discuss with each other. So you need to right now click on the Surface Deep Transfer Activity link that I put in the Whova chat. It is in there. And you will get into this slide deck. In just a minute, Shannon is going to open up, I think if we open up about 10 breakouts, then we can have group 3. And Shannon, you might have to maneuver people around if you see that somebody's in a breakout room all by themselves because somebody else didn't join. But I'm going to describe your activity, and this is really where the learning in this session happens, okay? So make sure you are going to the Whova chat. You can get to the Surface Deep Transfer Activity. I'm going to put it in this. I'm going to put it in the Zoom chat too. If you're like, I know how to find the Zoom chat easier, put it in the Zoom chat. And here's what's going to happen. In a minute, but not yet, you're going to go into a breakout room. With your breakout group, you will be assigned a numbered slide. So if you're in breakout room 2, you're going to go to slide 2. If you are in breakout room 3, your group will operate off of slide 3. Okay. And you as a group are going to introduce yourselves to one another and then ask yourselves, organizing notes. When readers have to organize notes, does that help them gain surface knowledge? Does that deepen what they've learned and read? Or does it have them show transfer that they can teach on this now, that they can be like peer tutors on this now? I just gave you the answer. So you are going to, as a group, you don't know who your groups are yet, but in your breakouts, you will work together and you will move these little descriptions. These are the top literacy strategies. So if I want to know, well, what does research say are the top strategies on helping students grow in surface learning comprehension? The answers are on these slides. If I want to know what research says is the top strategies that help readers deepen their literacy skills, the answers are on these slides. So you're going to talk as a group, you're going to move to Surface Deep and transfer in the columns, and then we'll go over the answers. This activity should take you about 10 minutes or so. It's 11:27. So about 11:40, we will come back, or when we stop seeing all your little animals move. But this is also something, if you're watching this at a later time, you can still engage in this. Add a blank, there's a ton of slides, so you can add a blank slide, and then you can replicate this within your staff. This is a really powerful exercise because we know a lot of these strategies, but the missing thing is we don't always purposefully think, these ones are good for surface learning or reteaching or re-explaining or building the background. These help deepen and go and process further. And that's important. If I want to know how to respond to data, I want to know how to enrich for some kids and reteach for other kids. And the answer can be in here. Okay. So again, we're going to put you into breakouts. Shannon, if you want to go ahead and open the breakouts, and we'll try to get 3 in a group. I am not going to join. Please accept when you are offered to go into a breakout. You can accept the breakout. And I'm going to keep screen sharing so you can see where what people do, how they move them around. There's a whole lot of people on slide 8, so that's really fun. If you can't go into a breakout, but you would like to maybe even hop on one of the later slides yourself and just do the activity on your own to drag and move, you are able to do that. I'm going to list that in the Whova platform too. And if you are trying to get into a breakout and are not having success, that is one of the things that we were looking at with the Whova platform. And Shannon, I didn't know if I needed to leave or if you might need to leave. That was what was unclear to me in Lena's email.
Right. I'm not sure either. I put everybody so they are with somebody now, but I'm not sure if people are not joining or if they're not able to join, if that makes sense.
Yes, no problem. Yeah. Well, if you would like to join a breakout and can't, definitely let Shannon or myself know. Otherwise, we'll anticipate your viewing and not actively participating right now, which is also okay. Irene is stuck in joining room 4. I don't know, Shannon, if you're able to. Thank you, Irene, for letting us know.
I'm going to try to move her a room and see if that helps. If not, I will try to I can leave and see if that.
It makes me worried if you leave.
I know.
Have you also,
it says end if I hit that, so I don't want to do that. I'm on the Whova one too. I can leave from Whova.
Have you made me I think don't leave. Let's see if we can't move Irene. And I might suggest, I wonder if she leaves and comes back, if that will help.
Okay.
Okay. I will also share, I like keeping the recording going while doing this as a group because you can see some thoughts of different groups. So even if you were checking this out at a later time, and I've not yet had one group get all the answers correct. And I've probably facilitated over 200 small groups now where they have had to try this activity. What I think is really great about this is this tells us that we don't know a lot of these answers. We don't know really what the research tells us. And so here we are gathering all this data, but we don't know like when to use which pieces when. I've also done this with different groups who have done this as a repeat and they have not gotten all the answers correct. And so I always think that's fun too, because even as adults, we think that we think, well, with our students, like, but I taught it this one time and they should learn it. And then as adult learners, it might be the second or third time that I've done this activity and I still don't remember. And the concepts still aren't embedded in there. And so, yeah, it just illustrates how we need more time and practice to learn things. I'm going to give our participants a few more minutes. Watching them move on the screen. This is really helpful to do when you are in a group setting because it's important for people to be able to discuss. That's why I like to put you in to some kind of small group. You can do this on chart paper. In a staff meeting, every group could have a piece of chart paper and you could take these descriptions and you could put them on little cards and the teams could have to move them. That's super, super, super helpful when you aren't doing it virtually. But when you're working on this virtually, a Google slide deck will also do the trick. I love it. Looks like we've got a couple different groups joining in different spots. I think our groups are going to be getting close to done soon. For those of us who aren't in the breakouts discussing and watching this part happen, I'm just going to read aloud to you some of their options. And then when we all come back, I'm going to share the answers. So some of the 18 top research-based literacy strategies. And again, some create surface comprehension, some create deeper analysis, and some create opportunities for students to transfer what they've learned. Here are the top 18. Organizing notes, phonics, summarization, direct instruction, note-taking, repeated readings, just reading something a second time, vocabulary, jigsaw, concept mapping, close reading, discussions, peer tutoring, reciprocal teaching, similarities and differences, metacognitive techniques, Socratic seminars, and extended writings. When I think as a former language arts teacher, I think about how often did I utilize these strategies in my classroom? And when I sat with my PLC, did we ever think, did we ask ourselves what research points to surface learning for literacy? No, we never asked ourselves that. And again, there are these strategies for math as well. And this comes from Hattie's big definitive research. It's not a program. These strategies aren't programs. They're not gimmicky. It's just what the research says works and how we react. Shannon, if you want to go ahead and if you could close the breakouts, that'll give our teams 1 minute, as they probably won't be done. That's totally fine. Give them that 1 minute countdown. We'll have people start coming back. But I think that this missing piece of research is really, really important. As a classroom teacher, I need to know what helps to create surface deep and transfer learning the first time through in my tier 1 instruction. But I also want to know which pieces are surface for reteach, which pieces are transfer for extension. I'm going to stop talking so I can let everybody hear this when they come back. And you're gonna get your answers. People always want the answers. I love the minute countdown because people are like, we're not done. That's okay. If you replicate this activity as well, I gave them about 12 minutes probably once they got in. It could take longer, but you don't need your teams to overthink it all. So better to err on the side of we weren't quite done than sitting and bored and being done for 5 minutes and all of that. Awesome. Okay, it's looking to me more now like I think who is still with us is back, and we might have people still popping in and out. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, I love putting this on gallery view as well, because then you can see the different groups moving and the decisions they're making. So as a total side note for how you could do this with students, you might have different various pieces of information, and then you are labeling the columns something different than what, obviously I've labeled them. And you are just asking the students in small groups to move and make decisions with the different pieces of information. This activity was actually asking you to organize notes. You didn't know that that's what you were doing. I gave you the notes and information and you had to organize them. So now it's time for answers. And not share, present. I shared before, and I might have done it when you were all in breakouts. I've done this activity probably with about 200 different small groups now, like each of your little small groups would be. And not one time, not once has a group gotten all the answers right. I love that, not to trick people, but because I think that when we look at a lot of those strategies, they're pretty familiar, but it doesn't mean that we know how to apply them appropriately in the time of our learning and teaching. And I think that's really the big aha. I wish I would have known as I was coaching and leading PLCs, you have this group of students that you need to reteach this skill on. Are they struggling with, and we think they're struggling with comprehension? Here are the strategies we use during the first read. Here are some strategies we use during a second or third. Okay, answer time. Here we go. You might need to be checking in 2 different locations. You're watching my screen and then checking your slide deck. Here are the top seven that help you create surface literacy, so comprehension. The very top 7, direct instruction with a gradual release type of protocol. I do, we do, you do. Phonics. There's a really good session, I think it's tomorrow afternoon, by Michelle Elia. She's a literacy specialist all around explicit phonics instruction. K2, in some districts now it's looking at K3, K4 as we come out of the pandemic. Explicit phonics instruction for all students. Equity is access to belonging and dignity. That access to phonics instruction is critical. Jigsaw readings. This one usually tricks people. A jigsaw is when you take a whole text, and instead of me having to read all of it, I'm reading a chunk of it. And then I'm getting in a small group and I'm discussing with that group with people who read that passage, to that part too. And then I go back and I have to share it with people who didn't read that part, and we have to teach each other. Jennifer Gonzalez, she writes Cult of Pedagogy blog, has an awesome little 6-minute video on jigsaw readings. I also have a free on demand on Keep Indiana Learning all about jigsaw readings and what that is. It's a 1.29 effect. It's one of the highest literacy strategies we can implement, but it helps to create comprehension. And it's really good to do at the beginning of a unit or in the first read of a text, or if I want to reteach again or dig further into an article with a group, a jigsaw read is powerful. Note taking, not I'm putting the information up and you are writing it down word for word. I'm talking about annotating, marking up a text, writing down what it is kids think they need to remember. Very, 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 very important. Vocabulary, summarization, and repeated reads. A repeated read is as simple as read it again, right? Just read it again. So if I'm a high school science teacher and I'm like, what can I do to improve literacy strategies in my classroom? Or how do I reteach this? Or what the issue isn't that the kids don't know the content, the reading is getting in the way. Simply having kids read part of a passage again a second time. Maybe you read it aloud to them first, and then they read it silently to themselves a second time. Hugely beneficial. Well, what about the deep? What about the deep analytical strategies? And all students need this. Don't be mistaken. It's not like kids can master vocabulary. No. Doing these things helps me to comprehend. I don't master all these things. Text gets more difficult. And every time the text gets more difficult, I have to do these things again. I need some note taking. I need to understand the vocabulary. It helps me to summarize what I read. These deep literacy strategies are really where the money is. And this is close reading, reciprocal teaching. Think of that as structured reading groups, metacognitive techniques, thinking about my thinking. So ask students to say why they chose what they chose is incredibly, why did you pick that piece of text evidence, right? Why did you choose to put this, why did you write those notes down? Why did you choose that detail to write down? Metacognitive techniques are just having kids think about the choices they're making in the midst of the learning. It's not after reflection. It's during the middle of the reading, during the middle of the whatever you're doing, having them think about their thinking and say why they're making the decisions they're making. That makes me think more deeply about what it is I'm doing. Organizing notes. I had you organize notes. I gave you all the strategies. You had to organize them. That was making you process information more deeply. Discussions, and then concept mapping. I also have a free on-demand all about concept mapping and close reading on Keep Indiana Learning. They're about 30 or so minutes a piece where I model what these strategies look like and we dive into them a little bit further. But again, I might be a social studies teacher and I'm wondering, how can I help my kids process the material more deeply before the test? Well, don't just have them take notes on something and then write about it. They need to maybe they take some notes on it. Maybe they read something a second time. Then maybe you put them in a small group and we have all of these facts or people and we have to make a concept map and we have to say how all the people are connected. So you're having me in a visual way process what I read more critically. All students need this. All students need these 6 deep literacy strategies. And the research tells us they impact reading the most. They accelerate learning the most. These. I need to build this into tier 1. I need to use this to accelerate students who are ready to move. I need to not believe that all my kids are always stuck on surface. If all I'm doing with my kids is having them memorize, they're never going to think more critically. And then finally, here are the 5 that help students transfer what they have learned. Socratic seminars, reading across text. So think of iLearn. If you're a tested grade, think of iLearn, where they have to read multiple passages on a similar topic and then figure out evidence from multiple passages and turn it into an extended writing. Yeah. iLearn wants to see, can they transfer what they've read? Have they read it at a critical enough level to then transfer what they've read into an extended writing? I don't get good. I can't show you. I can't transfer what I've read and how critically I've understood it if you never have me practice it. So if you never have me read 2 or 3 texts on a topic and then write about all 3, I can't, if I never practice that and we never do deep reading, critical reading lessons and strategies in our classroom, we never do those things. And then you give me a test and an assessment where I have to do extended writing, I'm not going to do well. And then you're going to wonder, as a teacher, I'm going to be like, how do I reteach this? Well, we got to go back to these strategies. So again, the research we draw upon is based on John Hattie's visible learning. I replicated an activity with you with the literacy strategies today. You can read visible learning for math. It's all of Hattie's research, and it goes, what are the top 18 strategies for math? Just like we did the top 18 for literacy. And it isn't always top 18. Like, I think math, it might be the top 15 strategies. But we've got to know to look at the research. And when it's time, when we get that data and we think, okay, how do I reteach? If any part of the issue in the assessment was reading comprehension, here are the 7 strategies that best accelerate that. So how do I reteach with this in mind? How do I teach my tier 1 with this in mind? As we wrap, I know I feel like I've just did a whole lot of talking at you, but I want you, if you're watching this at a later time, also to be able to engage, think, and process. Some of the top research I pulled from today, again, Visible Learning for Literacy by John Hattie, Doug Fisher, and Nancy Frey. Belonging Through a Culture of Dignity, Floyd Cobb and John Kronapple, amazing. And then Arrows, a systems-based approach to school leadership by my co-author, Sarah Henry, who will have a spotlight tomorrow afternoon. You can hop in with her. I think we have a 50 person max, so you can hop in and chat with her. I'll be in a different session, so I won't be in that one. If you are interested in finding and digging into any of those visible learning, yes, the visible, Irene is asking, would those be the visible learning for books? Yes, that's what I'm referencing. And again, visible learning is not a program. It is the name of the research, this meta-analysis research in education. It is updated every 2 years. It's an ongoing study. That's where we need to turn. And there are specific strategies they found that best accelerate literacy. I shared those with you today. And there are some that best accelerate math. There's visible learning for science. There's a couple of different ones. If you're interested in finding any of the free on-demands, you can go to keepindianalearning.org, register. It's free. There are so many other free resources on keepindianalearning.org as well. But I think about 6 that are some of those literacy strategies that we quickly unpacked in that activity. You can also connect with me from my website at carrierosebrock.com. You can follow me on social media. Please, please, please tweet and engage today using the hashtag virtually different. And I would love to hear any of your thoughts on what stood out from you. If there were any ahas, there are any takeaways from today's session, like please share in the chat, in the session feedback, or also on social media, because that is huge. If you are ready to give session feedback, you will find a link at the bottom of the session description in Whova. I was going to say today, but I keep getting stuck with like, you could be watching this anytime. And so it says session feedback, and there's a little bit.ly KINL survey link. You can click on that. You can enter in the title of my session today, which you can find in Whova, and then give some feedback. I'd love to hear what you thought and how today's session has got you thinking or is impacting you. It's 11:52, so I'm going to leave these last 8 minutes for any questions. You can pop the questions into the Whova chat. I am watching the Zoom chat if I need to, and you can unmute. I think they can unmute. Shannon will be able to. Yeah, Shannon's nodding. You can unmute and just ask a question as well. We've got a question and Q&A. Awesome. Yes. Okay. Such a good question. So 0.4 or higher. Here's the question in the Q&A. Can I share again what the numbers in parentheses for each strategy are for? They're on the slide deck. A 0.4 is 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. What we want to see happen with a student, including developmental, teacher effects, whatever it might be. If there's a strategy with a 0.4 label, it equals 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. So discussions, I believe, is like a 0.51. That's a little bit more than 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. That tells me it is a beneficial strategy to use. You can dive into Hattie's visible learning research and see that there are strategies that have like a 0.2, a 0.15. There are strategies that have a negative, like boredom is a negative 0.45. So if a child sits bored for a year, that's creating a gap. Like it's like losing a year of learning. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I was bored. So 0.4 or higher is the magic number. And I'm going to put this 0.4 or higher equals 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. You're just hearing me narrate. And so Jigsaw in the activity that you can find in our session, or if you participated, Jigsaw was a 1.29. That is like over 3 years growth in 1 year's time. That's crazy. Now, I'm not going to jigsaw read every day. Jigsaw, again, is when you take a passage and you break it into chunks and we assign reading groups. It's kind of more complicated than I'm going to describe now. But jigsaw is a really important literacy strategy for building surface learning and comprehension. As a teacher, I want to build in some jigsaw readings into my tier 1 typical classroom instruction. But I might also utilize that strategy if I need to reteach or reread a passage with a small group who needs, again, more time. All students matter. So it shouldn't just be about, we read this one time. Now you should be at the part where I need you to process it. Some kids are going to take more than that. They need a reread or they need a different strategy in a reteach. Awesome question. Any other questions? Yes. Just watching both. You can, again, access the survey in the bottom of the session description from today. So we are going to go ahead. It's 11:56. We will go ahead and wrap our session for today. Thank you so much if you joined live, and thank you so much if you are coming back and rewatching this session. You can access the slide deck in the description, and it will also include the link to the Surface Deep and Transfer activity. Replicate it, use it, do it with your staff. Find the ones that impact math, replicate this, do it with your staff. It's really powerful to think through which strategies create surface, deep, and transfer, and then applying that to what do I do for kids who don't get it? What do I do for kids to accelerate that? And I think that's part of what we are after. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your conference, and hopefully I'll see you in a few other sessions. Bye.
Let me go ahead and end the session, Carrie.
I think so, Shannon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.